You're live, Your Worship.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at our council meeting. This is Monday, October the 25th, 2021. Clearview Township Council. Council has been meeting in camera since 4 o'clock. We've just returned from that, and we're now going to pick up the rest of our agenda at this point. So we now go to item number 2, which is approval of the agenda. So I'll read that and look for a mover and seconder. Recommendation be it resolved that Council of the Township Clearview hereby approve the agenda dated October 25, 2021 as presented. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Deneen, Councillor McKechnie. Thank you very much. Any questions of the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? Yeah. And that carries. And just acknowledge that Councillor Leishman was with us, but she stepped away. She's going to be joining us later, we hope. So we'll still have a quorum here. So we're going to carry on our meeting. Okay, Council. Item number 3 is our disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Is there any disclosures tonight? Yes, Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. This past week, I've been in touch with the Integrity Commissioner, and I'd like to read the following comment. I have an interest in presentation item 5.1 on today's agenda on the basis that I am a homeowner within the affected area and will be subject to such charges as council may impose for the construction of wastewater facilities on public lands and for my private costs made necessary in order to connect to those facilities. At this point, that 5.1 comes on the agenda, I will be leaving the meeting and will return when the clerk has given me the okay to return. I will then reconnect and continue with the meeting.
All right, well, thank you very much for that, Councillor Walker, for your acknowledgement of that. And that's good to hear that you pre-consulted with the Integrity Commissioner, as all of us should do. All right, members of council, thank you. Anything further? Any other members with any other disclosures? All right, if anything else comes up during the meeting, please bring it forward and we'll discuss it and deal with it immediately. Okay, members of council, item number 4 is our public participation period. We do have 8 items that have been sent in to us. I think most of them all came today. So I do want to say, be advised that comments and views expressed under the public participation period are not the views of the Township of Clearview Council or the administration. Further, I want to acknowledge that many of these people entered their comments online using the online portal at clearview.ca for public participation period. Some were received by email and some were received by email to the incorrect addresses, but our trustee clerk and the clerk's department were able to assemble this group of actual questions for public participation period. And so we have them here in front of us now today. I just want to, again, advise the public, please go to our website, clearview.ca, and there's a public participation portal available for filling out the correct form. So we'll get started. The first item is item 4.1. It's a question from Mr. Witzke in regards to the Clearview transit system. And Mr. Witzke is concerned, a statement saying that it's a disaster, fiscally and in the routing. I deny, or I absolutely dispute this comment about it being a disaster. In fact, the transit system serving the Township of Clearview, particularly in Stayner, has been a great success. It's been, a lot of people have been using that particular service. I do want to say, though, that it's a service in our community, and that's why it financially costs us taxpayers money. That's what it costs. There was some information that you should know. New fares and routing are being considered and will be developed as the new subdivisions that are being built around Clearview Township come online. And the route to Wasaga Beach that you mentioned in your comments regarding links, the Simcoe County Link service, they do not serve Clearview on the weekends. So our service, the Clearview Transit Service System, does. And so thank you for your comment, Mr. Witzke. We will be continuing to monitor all of our services here and also monitor the ability of our transit provider to continue to deliver us a safe transit system. Mr. Witzke also asked item number 4.2. This is in regards to the Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Club's bridge that's located in Centennial Park. This project is a part of the Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Clubs and the Blue Mountain Snow Drifters, which is an agency of the OFSC. And a comment I'd like to give to you, Mr. Witzke, is from our chief building official that bridges are not under the authority of the Ontario Building Code. You made a comment in your statement that you felt it was underneath the OBC, Ontario Building Code. Bridges are not. They are, however, falling underneath engineering standards and good practice by engineers. And there are some statements online that were made available to us. So we will be investigating that and ensure that the bridge, as this project moves ahead in Centennial Park, will be built to the correct standards and the correct engineering standards that are required of those type of bridges. So that's good news. I do not have the information about what that bridge is going to look like. I'm not sure, Mr. CAO, if any of the staff are prepared to answer any questions further about that bridge. I do know that we have talked at length about this bridge, as we've had this same question asked by the same individual several times. So, Mr. CAO, I'm not sure if anybody else on staff want to comment about this Ontario Federation Snowmobile Club bridge in Centennial Park.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do know that Terry Vachon has been in discussions with the Snowmobile Association, and there is an intention to improve the bridge, and it'll have to meet certain standards. Terry, if you're able to comment on that any further.
Hello, Mr. Vachon. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Your Worship. No, we thank you, and also CAO Ferguson. We have not received details yet with respect to those designs for those bridges, or for that bridge, sorry. We're still waiting for that information to come in. My understanding is all the groups that are involved are still working on those designs. I'm sure I'm assuming we're going to receive those designs very shortly, and I'll be happy to share those with council once received.
All right, thank you, Terry. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right, we're going to move on then to item 4.3. Mr. Brockbank asked a question in regards to Regina Street to Highway 26 about widening and proper sidewalks. That's in regards to a section of road that, for those that aren't aware, Regina Street has sort of two names. It's also North Street. It's the same street, the same piece of road. Goes from Highway 26 right up past the Stainer Arena, and then becomes a Regina up there. So, you know, this is an interesting one, actually. It's all part of the plan that the developers in that area are to put in some widening of that road when the development extends to the north side of the road, and also sidewalks will be part of that. I'm unaware as to the status of what that project is. I'm not sure if Miss Burton or perhaps Mike Ron have a comment on that. I don't know the answer to that particular question, but it is a good point about it being widened or sidewalk. So through Mr. Ferguson, Mr. Ron, would you like to comment about that section of North Street?
Certainly, Your Worship. So, yeah, that's absolutely correct. The road needs to be upgraded and urbanized when the development proceeds. We thought that developer would have proceeded by now. They've had basically the go-ahead for quite some time. They've not participated in the water allocation agreements to date. And there was some question about ownership, but that's here nor there. When that development proceeds, we will that road will be urbanized, and it will add cost savings to the township.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So thank you, Mr. Brockbank, for bringing this forward, but I don't have an answer for you on that either. Perhaps what we can do is investigate through Mara Burton, who works closely with our developers, or through Mr. Ron, to see if there's any movement on that work. Oh, hello, Mara. I see you joined us. You got any comment on that as well? What any news you have about that development?
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, no, it's pretty quiet right now with that project at 211 North Street. So as soon as we have an opportunity to talk to the developer, then, we will certainly check on the status of that. But at this point, the property was for sale, and we really haven't, it's pretty quiet right now. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for that. Well, hopefully that helps answer some of those public participation questions. We do have several questions here in regards to Sunnydale Street. And I know that we've recently had a meeting that was an in-person. Yes, Clerk Helmke, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Measures through you and the rest of council. Actually, public participation period item 4.8 is not a part of the Sunnydale Street questions. So I don't know if you'd like to address that one right now before you move forward.
You're trying to jump ahead on me. I appreciate that. I can do that right now if you wish. That'd be fine. How about I do that? Item 4.8, Sharon asked a question regarding 27, 28, Highway 26, and the roundabout and the proposed roundabout. Listen, that one is a good one. We've made delegations to the Ministry of Transportation in regards to this particular intersection there at Highway 26. 27, 28, as it goes east from that intersection, is a county road. The county participated with us. I believe our Deputy Director of Public Works, Dan Perot, had joined me in meeting the ministry about that very discussion. That was several years ago. Since then, we've actually not had any further communication from the MTO about the potential for a roundabout at that intersection as they continue to move towards having a signalized intersection where there'll be traffic lights there. But we did meet with the parliamentary assistant to the Ministry of Transportation on site. The CAO, Mr. Perot, and myself, along with a sort of a convoy of trucks and vehicles that were touring some of the transit areas around our communities and around South Georgian Bay, did stop, and we looked at that with the parliamentary assistant. We advised that our community preferred option is to have a roundabout at that intersection. However, they at the MTO are continuing to move towards having a signalized traffic light put up at that intersection. And so the most recent information that we received was that there are some infrastructure works that have gone on there and some planning for 2022. There will be a relocation of hydro and some gas lines in that area that'll need to be moved so that they can then move ahead with the building of a signalized intersection. So it's my hope that we will have a roundabout there, but I'm not holding my breath, as we can tell when you're dealing with the MTO. So thank you, Ms. Cameron, for forwarding that. Now, as our clerk pointed out, we do have several items about Sunnydale Street. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to go right to our CAO. Mr. Ferguson, would you like to address the Hackett's question about the notice for the in-person public meeting? So Mr. Ferguson, would you like to answer that one first?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. There were a couple of questions in Mr. Hackett's email this morning, and one of the concerns is that the 2 business day notice on the second PIC meeting, which is the Public Information Center, was sent out on a Friday morning. It was delivered to homes, and then the meeting was actually on a Tuesday evening the following week. It's a fair question, and it's not something that we wanted to do on short notice. To help understand, we are under, he asked a question, is this legal? So our legal obligations with respect to legislation and regulation would suggest that we would have at least one public information center. That was scheduled on September 30th, and we sent the notices out, I think, on September 16th. About 2 weeks in advance of that particular public information center. We also advised at the Public Information Center meeting on September 30th that the consideration of the Sunnydale matter would be before council on October 25th. At the September 30th Public Information Center meeting, citizens and I think one lawyer in the citizen group requested that we have another meeting and it be in person. And so we endeavored to schedule that as soon as possible, but we needed to have 2 matters occur first. We had to go back to council and get instruction, and we also had to sit down and discuss the matter with 4 developers in order to see if there is something else that could be done in this circumstance. Following those 2 meetings, we then scheduled the earliest point that we could get an evening meeting where people were available, and we chose Tuesday, I believe October 19th as the date. And it wasn't short notice. We do apologize that it wasn't short notice, but the original Public Information Center was held on September 30th. And I would also like to state that tonight's meeting is another opportunity to discuss this. And the actual bylaw for this process won't occur until the next coming meetings, and we haven't scheduled that as of yet. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. There are several other questions on here in regards to this project. So 4.5 from Craig and Tara, they brought forward an issue specific to their property. And I'm wondering if through the clerk, we could go to Kelly. I know, Madam Clerk, you reviewed this as well, that there was the owners here at this particular home were concerned about their prepayment of charges. So John or Sasha, can we ask Kelly to review that information? And I know it's still a little complicated from what I understand. So Ms. McDonald, our treasurer, do you have a comment about that, about what the status is on that particular project there?
We are reviewing this, Your Worship. It was brought to our attention this morning. That's a little bit of a short time frame to try and get all the information gathered together. They are correct. They did pay development charges under bylaw 14-58. So I can confirm that to them this evening. But as far as the rest of their email goes, I'll be taking it to the Watson and Associates to discuss with them.
So if I could suggest then to these residents that they will hear directly from someone from our staff about this. Is that correct, Kelly and Sasha and John? You guys are committing to do that? Okay, appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So that way someone will answer this. It is a specific question to a specific house in this entire project. So I think it's best that it be dealt with that way. So please do that. All right, item 4.6, Ms. Freeman asked some questions, actually had several questions. I'm going to go to Mike Ron, as Mike Ron participated in the in-camera session. Mr. Ron, her first question on there, we are not going to answer in regards to Councillor Walker, as Mr. Walker indicated his conflict of interest here at the beginning. So how about we move to question number 2 on that list. Mr. Ron, would you be able to start from there?
Certainly, Your Worship. I can answer. There was 6 questions. I can answer 2 through 6 if that's
Sure.
satisfactory.
Sure.
Ms. Freeman asked if there's a current road allowance behind some of the houses on Sunnydale Street. Will they be required? Well, the question says, will we in the future need to pay for the development of the road behind us, sewage system, urbanization costs, etc.? So to clarify, so the existing property owners right now are not paying for urbanization. If severances are considered at the back of the properties in the future, those owners will have to pay for their share of those new services. So for council's knowledge, at the west end of Sunnydale Street, it's not a road allowance per se. It could be turned into, and we expect it to be turned into a road allowance at some point. There would be the opportunity for some of the Sunnydale Street properties to sever the backs off to be totally separate lots if and when services were provided. So the short answer is if somebody collects benefiting services, they have to pay for them. So the second question, Mr. Ron stated in the in-person meeting that there are no government grants at the moment for the payment of the sewer system. Why can this project not wait until there are more funding options available? And if we were to pay before grants are available, will we be seeing a refund in the future when grants are awarded to the township? For the first part of that, why can't we wait? The township's proceeding in a timely manner. We've got, well, Manortown's one of the developments that we're working towards servicing. We've gone through the EA process, waiting for funding, whether or not that's even a thing we could do. We haven't been successful very often because quite frankly, we're too financially stable.
Yeah.
So future grant opportunities would be used for projects that are current to the time of the grant. And there would be no refunds. A future grant, maybe for something like the Creemore Sewage Treatment Plant, there would be no refunds to Sunnydale Street residents or a post-funding application for that project. Number 4. So this is regarding if we're to stay on septic and the drinking water supply was contaminated, would we all be on the hook for the much larger cost? Plus bringing water in from possibly Collingwood. What evidence is there showing that our septic systems would contaminate the drinking water of Stainer if council choose for us not to hook up? So the provinces deem septic systems as a significant threat to drinking water well supplies. That's under the Clean Water Act, source water protection plans. Council will recall our building inspectors were doing septic inspections. We certainly don't want anyone to think there's an imminent threat to a water supply because of a septic system. But the township has an obligation to reduce risks of any threats to our drinking water systems whenever possible. Like that's mandated under 3 different acts of legislation: the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, and the Ontario Water Resources Act. So the 5th question was about when the emergency services building was built, businesses and houses weren't connected at that time. Were they told the same information that if they contaminate the drinking water with their septic systems, will they be paying somewhere in the range of hundreds of thousands of dollars? So the emergency hub sanitary system was only sized for that particular building. And had that emergency hub been on Sunnydale Street, we would have had to initiate the environmental assessment, and we'd be in the same place we are right now, providing solutions for sanitary sewage. The last question was, is there any way to go back to the developer and ask them to donate more money to ease the burden financially of the residents on Sunnydale Street? The township cannot mandate charges to the developer to provide services to existing homes. We'll probably talk about that a little bit during Gary's presentation, but it's just we're not allowed to do that. When we went to the development community and discussed this, Gary will expand on it. They quite generously, in my opinion, offered financial assistance. So this was easier. That answers all the questions, Your Worship.
All right, thank you very much for that, Mike. Mike, I don't want you to go away though, because there is another question here that came in similar sort of line of thought from Diane and Gary in regards to any overruns or recovery of fees other than fees. And how about the issue of any permit fees? I know it was talked about briefly at the in-person meeting on the 19th. So can you just review that again about the recommendation that staff would bring forward for council to consider?
Certainly, Your Worship. So during the in-person meeting, we did, sorry, I'm just reading the question again. Okay. Yeah, the township, we did state that the cost of the existing Sunnydale residents would be kept to within 2% for the municipally contracted work. So that would be the work done on the street and up to the property line. As far as the permit fees, that's going to be a discussion we'll have with council. If council so chooses, we can absorb those permit fees, like the plumbing inspection permit fees. We've done it on Mowat Street North. That's something council can choose to do. We would obviously support any decision council makes.
Okay. Those fees are in the hundreds, they're not in the thousands as far as dollar value. Is that correct? I'm not sure. I've never had to purchase a fee like that. So
sure. So the plumbing inspection fee is $170 that our
there you go.
Our building inspectors would look at everything, make sure there's no leaks, it's on grade, and it's going to last for 100 years kind of thing. So. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much. So I think that pretty well wraps up some of these questions that come in. I would encourage the public who are watching, who are interested in this, to stay with us, because very shortly we have Gary Scanlon and Darrell Abs returning to review this entire project with us in a presentation to council. So we will be doing that here shortly. And I want to thank people for participating in our public participation portal. And council, I'll move on then to item number 5, deputations presentations. There will be 2 tonight. We're going to get to the first one, which is 5.1. I want to acknowledge that Mr. Walker, Councillor Walker, acknowledges conflict and is not here. And so at this point, then, I do want to welcome Gary Scanlon, who is now becoming a regular attendee at our council meetings. Mr. Watson, you know, if we had an office for you, I guess we'd find a place for you, but we don't have an office around here to put you in right now, but glad you're joining us virtually. And I understand you have Mr. Abbs with you. Also, Daryl, nice to see you again. I know you joined us at the council meeting just shortly, or a few council meetings ago as well. So thank you for joining us, gentlemen. And again, thank you for the work that you're doing on behalf of the township. Gary, I'd like to pass this directly over to you to review the results of the PICs. We've had 2. And if there's any questions from council, maybe we can ask them at the end of your presentation. Go ahead, Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Always a pleasure to be with council. We put together a slide presentation, which I think the clerk has control of. So if she's able to pull it up, then I'll quickly go through. Most of this is to some extent a recap. I want to take you through the steps and talk about the 2 public information centers that we had. As the CIO indicated, we had one in September, and then subsequently we had one in mid-October. And so that resulting from the first one, we did respond, and that's why we had the second PIC. I think we came back with some significant answers to those questions, and actually, to some extent, some positive news where we were able to get some recovery from the developing landowners. They were generously offered some funds, and I'll touch upon that. Are you able, Sasha, to pull that presentation up, or?
Through you, Gary, through your worship, my computer's crashing a little bit, so I've asked that Daryl please present the presentation. Gotta love virtual meetings, I have to say.
No problem.
It's taxing on all of our computers, that's for sure. So I appreciate that. Okay, so Daryl, you've got it, Daryl. Okay, so Daryl and Gary, go right ahead.
Yeah, so Daryl likes to say that I'm technologically impaired, so I'm glad that he's got control. So if we go to the first slide, please, Daryl. Or slide page 2. So we'll just go through a quick overview of the steps that we went through, summarizing the costs and the dialogue that we've had with the residents of the Sunningdale area. Next slide. So you recall the area which we are looking at. It's provided within the red circle there. Obviously, this is the area where we'd be looking to, the primary project in that area is the sewage collection system. And we'll go through a little bit more detail on that. There was an EA that was undertaken, and through that EA, and the EA was provided by Burnside, and they took a look at 3 different options. One which would allow for the one development that's at the very eastern part of this area. They would potentially go alone to build their own system. The option 2 was to take a look at not only providing their development, but all the residents along Sunningdale and some of the commercial developments that are at the very eastern end. And there are some developing landowners as well within that catchment area. And I'll show you that in a moment. And then there was an even broader option 3, which considered a number of lands to the south. At the end of the day, the developments that were to the very southern part of this area dropped off. We talked with them. They weren't interested in proceeding. So we were moving ahead with option 2. Next slide. And these are the lands which are considered as part of the servicing plan. The ones that are in the lighter blue, those are the existing homes that were, or existing properties that you can see. The 6837 is existing commercial properties. But the residual of those for the most part are residential. The gray area are the developing landowners. Manitown is the one that's at the very extreme right-hand side, adjacent to Highway 26. And the other gray areas are potential properties that are looking to proceed and which would be hooked up and benefit from these properties as well. So we've looked to, with respect to the wastewater system, to provide and distribute the costs amongst all of the properties that will ultimately be hooking into the system. Next slide. The pumping station and the force main are the largest component of the cost, being about 4.2 million, and then the sewer works, which are all the linear, all of basically for the most part the sewers, the gravity sewers, which will take the flows down to the pumping station. So that totals about $7.8 million, and that is the cost that we're looking to recover from both the developing landowners as well as from the residents, the existing residents shown on the prior map. There are two other projects. That's the, as part of this, we would look to urbanize the Sunningdale from top to bottom, and that would provide us with wider streets, curb and gutter, storm, as well as sidewalks. And then the municipality is looking to replace the major water main, which is underneath Sunningdale, in order to, it's probably 40, 50 years old. We'd be looking to replace it and to upsize that facility as well. So the road works and the water works are not being charged directly to the developing landowners. A lot of those road works and water works will be paid for by development. There will be some contributions back from the municipality, but the only works that we're talking about as a charge per property are the first two, the pumping station, force main, as well as the sewer works. Next slide. This map you've probably seen before. It provides for the sewer system only. And if I start with the red and the cayenne color, that light blue and the red, that's a breaking point where on the red, all of the flows of the sewage would be moving to the east, and with the cayenne, all of the flows move to the west. And what's important about this is that everything that's moving to the east, all of the flows associated with the existing properties as well as the developing landowners, all of those flows will eventually make it down into the sewage pumping station, the brand new sewage pumping station. And then the hatched area is the force main. So the pumping station will force the sewage basically uphill until it hits the cayenne area, the cayenne pipe. And that's where it'll continue to be gravity fed back down. It'll go through Sunningdale, then down through Phillips, and then on to Highway 26. So the costs associated with these developments are noted here. Next slide. When that map that we had up, what we've done is we've represented all of the costs on a common basis. So it's easier to understand the flows associated with all of the different properties. And the flows have been calculated on a single detached equivalent. So Burnside have gone through and they've said the average flow for a single family home is X amount. And they've looked at all the properties, the existing as well as the developing properties, and they've represented them on a common basis. Here's the equivalent flows of a single family residential building. So the existing properties, there's 77 SDEs, single detached equivalent. And for the developing properties, there's 151. So roughly 1/3 of the cost would be looked at from the existing residents, 2/3 from the developing landowners. Next slide. And when we take a look at the costs, this is how, now this includes all of the work. So this includes the pumping station and force main and the sewer works. So the first two rows are really the ones that we're talking about here. And I'll stop with those for a moment. Most of the costs, as you can see, there's for the developers. So through development charges and direct contributions for the pipes, they will be paying for about $4.7 million of the works. There's the existing properties, which are about 2.6. And then there's about $600,000, which would come in from rates. Some of the works are to the benefit of, there's some benefit to the existing residents. So there'll be a contribution through the rates of about 600,000. So those really are the ones that we're talking about. The other two works will be done concurrently if council approves moving ahead with these. Then concurrently, they would urbanize the road, which is about 2.8 million. And most of that would be paid for by the developers. And there would be about 10%, which would be payable by property taxes. Now, the municipality has a reserve fund set aside. You've been putting money every year into this reserve fund that's there for urbanization of the roads within the existing urban communities. So we would be drawing down from that fund. That's what the money's there for. And basically, there's no direct charge to any of the existing properties. On the water side, as I've noted, that water in part is being replaced and upside. So there is a contribution from the water rates as well as a direct developer contribution towards those works. So that really summarizes the totality of the projects, but the road and the waterworks are something for council to consider in conjunction with the sewer projects. But the focus of the PICs and discussions with the staff are for the first two items only, which is the pumping station as well as the sewer works. Next slide. So we talked about the $2.6 million, which was the existing benefit, and the 77 existing single detached equivalent units. When we divide that into the 2.6 million, it ended up to be $33,740 per single detached existing residential unit. Now, that was the amount that we went to the first PIC and that the residents were considering, and we've obviously received a number of comments through that process. But that was the number that we presented at the first PIC. Next slide. And with that, the options, there's always the option to pay the amount up front. The municipality has done a number of these projects in the past. So Sunningdale is not the first one of these. There's been other streets that have been developed, similar type of thing where you're given the option to pay up front if you have your own financial resources, or the municipality would grant a loan and you'd be able to pay that over 20 years. And current interest rate is just below 3%. And based on that, you'd be paying $2,268 per year over the 20-year period. Now, these costs only bring the sewage line to the property line. So the sewage connection has to be made from the house to the property line. So the cost of hooking the house to the property line is also a cost that the individual landowners would have to address. So those costs are at the direct cost of the residents. The municipality is not stepping into the properties in order to incur those costs or undertake that work as well. Next slide. So at the end of the PIC, the presentation we provided in a lot of detail, and then as well, prior to the meeting, we had received over 30 questions from 10 online submissions. So it was, and actually that was excellent because it brought a lot of the questions, I'm sure, that were in the residents' minds to the forefront. And we were able to talk through and discuss each of those concerns. So the first half, about an hour and a half, was doing the presentation and then answering these pre-sent questions. And then the next hour and a half was basically receiving virtual questions and concerns and issues from the existing residents. So about a 3-hour PIC, and as I say, a lot of it dealing with the questions and the concerns of the residents. Now, key feedback at very high level: 33,700, unaffordable. The addition of decommissioning the private services and the hook-in costs are unknown. I had communicated there that in my experience that a lot of the properties are in and around 5,000, but that does vary depending on the nature of the property and where the servicing has to come from the house, et cetera. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that was the order of magnitude, and we've come back to there were still concerns about that. Limited communication prior to reaching out to the residents. So we've tried to, obviously address that through this PIC, a subsequent PIC, having the residents reach out to council, et cetera. So we're trying to make it as full as possible. Next slide. So with that in mind, we went and talked to the development community and expressed that the cost associated with the residents was very, very heavy. And we reached out to dialogue with them. And through that process, and this is something that we cannot mandate, as Mike said, there was a change in the Development Charges Act, Bill 73, which was put into place in 2015. So we cannot mandate costs that are in excess of the development charges and such. But the developers had come together and they had offered $10,000 additional contribution for each of their SDEs. So you recall there was 151 SDEs for the developing landowners. So each of those SDEs will basically contribute $10,000. Now, because the residents are probably half the amount of development, it translates into almost a $20,000 contribution for each of the existing residents. So that takes us from the original $33,740 down to $14,130. Once again, and from my perspective, I think it is a generous contribution from the developing landowners. They got together after we had the discussions. They went offline and they talked amongst themselves. We had some further dialogue and such. And at the end, they offered the $10,000. So the new cost that we're looking at is $14,130 per resident. That's the new cost that we're now talking about if we proceed with this particular project. Next slide. In listening to the residents, we also provided a longer term payment plan. So we went from 20 years to 30 years, which would mean that the amount of the payments per year would drop as well. And then we also we will allow the residents 3 years from the time we finish construction of the project. They'll be allowed 3 additional years in order to hook up to the system. So the original loan amount that we talked about is going from $2268 down to $721 per year per resident. So roughly about $60 a month is the contribution we're talking about at this point. They will have 3 years to hook up after the construction of the system, and but they'll still be responsible for the individual cost to connect from the house to the property line where the municipal sanitary sewer is. Next slide. So we had talked, and so the feedback from the residents, the reduction in cost is appreciative. There was respectful comments there, but the comment is the amount is still expensive, and some would like to have the development community pay more of the costs. As I say, that obviously a higher contribution would be welcomed, but as I say, it's not something that we can mandate. And through the discussions that we've had with them, they've generously offered to subsidize these units, the existing homeowners, by about $20,000 per homeowner. The cost of the owned property to connect is still unknown for each individual property. We had a considerable dialogue. Mike Ron and Don McNulty and Jennifer Gregors were great in answering a lot of the questions. We actually set out a number of the costing. On average, it is in the range of about $5,300 to decommission the septic system, and then on average to run the pipes to the property line. Mike had, the Director of Public Works, have reached out to a number of individual contractors and such, got some actual pricing. There will be some more complex properties, it is acknowledged. They will be certainly on the lesser end. And he identified that potentially it could be up to $10,000 for certain properties. Residents still don't feel that they benefit from these works. So that's an observation. At this point in time, if their septic system is functioning, they don't feel that they benefit from it. At a certain point, I live on in the country, I live on a septic system. I'm only 20 some odd years down the road. A couple of my neighbors' septic systems have already failed. It happens. And all I can say is the benefit is when you need it. And at this particular point, if none of the septic systems have failed, then in fairness, the benefit is not felt that it's being received at the immediate time. Residents feel the septic systems are working, but are now being forced to connect. So that's an obvious conclusion. As I say, if they feel that the septic systems are functioning well. Next slide. I'll turn over, there's two slides that I'll hand over to Director of Public Works. He's much more adept to answering these or providing the background in these areas. So I'd ask Mike to stand in for next two slides, please.
Thanks, Gary. So council, at the meeting, I did speak to the audience on some of the things that, obviously are concerns for us. Gary mentioned we did talk about some of the costs and did mention some of this legislation. So first and foremost, the municipality has to comply with action regulations. The EA outcome said to service the entire area. That was over a 1-year process, probably a couple $100,000 item. And then I threw the what if there. So if the municipal well became affected by the septic system, what would happen? Well, as your Director of Public Works, I would suggest, and let's just pretend the developers aren't there. This is just a what if. If the development community wasn't there and there was a well being affected by a septic system, my report to council would be we need to put sewage in this area, and the residents would have to pay for the entire shot. Every sewer pipe in Clearview Township has been paid for by the people whose property it runs across. When the Stainer sewer system was built, there's numerous bylaws that were passed, stage 1, 2, and 3. They shared the cost of the plant, all the pipes in the road, etc. As the sewer systems expanded, the same thing happened. Mullet Street North, people would put pipes in, people had to connect, they got charged. Lock Avenue, people had to connect, they got charged. The entire town of Creemore paid for the entire sewer system. Now there was government funding there. And I mentioned this at the meeting, there isn't government funding for a lot of sanitary sewers or water systems right now, but that was a benefit. At the time, the brewery supplied money as well. That was a benefit, and it knocked the cost down. But I do believe the cost was still around $20,000 per property, and that was about 20 years ago. Talked to a real estate agent recently, town of Wasaga Beach. He said that the price is $1,000 per foot per side of the road. So that would be on a 66-foot lot, $66,000. I didn't relay this at the meeting. This person watched the meeting and told me about this after. As far as the, so the cost to service Sunnydale without developers, $6 million for a pump station and a force main and a gravity sewer. And if we had to split that amongst the individual property owners, it would be about $78,000. And then if we did contaminate the well, hopefully we would find a problem long before we had to decommission a well. But we all know how much a new water supply costs, because we're building one in Klondike Park Road right now, 7 kilometers east of Stainer. Well, not building it. We're hopefully going to build it shortly. The next slide talks about the regulations. So the provincial policy statement. The provincial policy statement is one of the guidelines, well, actual legislation, I guess. Mayor can speak to this better than I can, but requires municipal water services. They're the preferred form of servicing for settlement areas to support protection of the environment and minimize potential risks to human health and safety. Minimize potential risks to human health and safety. We are in a settlement area in this portion of Stainer. We're putting sewers in because we're told to, and we're trying to find the best way to do it that's affordable to the people. The official plans for the township and the county, the official plans all say, you know, the preferred water supply and sanitary sewage disposal servicing approach being determined on the basis of the hierarchical review favoring the use of full municipal services. So there's 2 official plans, provincial policy statement. The Planning Act kind of brings those things together. Planning Act also, in so many words, says municipality must work with the developers in good faith relating to servicing, which we're trying to do. We've done our due diligence. We've done environmental assessment. The laws of the province are telling us we need to service this street. The Development Charges Act, as Gary's already mentioned and I did, the township cannot mandate charges to the developer to provide services to the existing homes. If you're interested, the Development Charges Act, Section 59 spells that out, but you have to go through a whole bunch of other pieces of legislation to figure it out. So the Clean Water Act, get the Clean Water Act up there. The source water protection plans dictate that septic systems are a significant threat to drinking water systems. And then council, with the Safe Drinking Water Act, the township has an obligation to reduce risk of threats to drinking water whenever possible. And everyone took the standard of care training. It applies to municipal council. Council are the owners of the drinking water systems. The standard of care, you know, it sets out fines of $4 million in prison time and it's personal liability. It's not something that I would feel comfortable, you know, taking a risk, and I won't. And I also teach for the province, and I teach that we don't take risks, we try to mitigate risk. So installation of the sewer on Sunnydale Street will reduce that risk as well. So those are some of the legislation pieces that we as staff are thinking about. We don't enjoy imposing fees on people. I know lots of people on that street. We got a job to do, and we're doing the job based on all of these rules and regulations. So want staff to be aware, or council to be aware of those things as well. And I really do appreciate Gary and Don, like, you know, really well spoken at the meeting, and as always, make us look good most of the time. Thank you. Any questions at the end? I guess we're doing that, Gary?
That's correct. Well, a couple of more slides and we'll be able to do it. So the options before council will be basically twofold. The servicing that we've talked about, which would be, you know, servicing the 77 existing properties, as well as the development, is the one that we've talked about. That would allow all of the lands in the gray area to develop. And it would also allow the residents to receive municipal wastewater service. And at a reduced cost at this particular point, then if at some point, as I say, they'd have to go alone. It would also pave the way for the urbanization of Sunningdale Street and the upgrade of the existing water main. We've noted, obviously, with the almost $20,000 per unit contribution, the costs have been, for the residents portion, has been reduced significantly. So that's an opportunity. If this project is turned down, there is the option for Manortown to go it on their own. And obviously all of the cost would be borne directly by Manortown. Now, the sizing of the pumping station is going to be significantly reduced. The sizing of the force main will be significantly reduced. So it will be sized only for that development. So it's not like they will proceed and then a year later we'll jump on the backs and be able to do it. It's well undersized. So if we're going to allow the existing residents to hook in per se, it would be a paralleling of a separate system in order to size everything to allow them to proceed. So it's an option of an opportunity or to not go. If Manortown goes on its own, then the other developing landowners as well would not be allowed to proceed. And then existing residents remain on septic. There's no urbanization of the road, and there's no upgrade of the existing sewer main or water main, at least at this time. So really that's where we are at, I guess, for further consideration for council moving ahead. Next slide. From staff's perspectives, from the consultants, both the engineering as well as the the financial consultants, we're recommending to allow the servicing of the area. So option one, or this full option, to proceed with the additional contributions from the landowners. And if that's council's will, then we'll need to direct staff to proceed with this. Option one being the prior slide, not the original EA, just so I'm clear. So this would provide for the servicing of the whole area, provide for the road urbanization, and provide for the water main upgrade. We would then look to have the financial agreements with the developers signed on, so we have the guaranteed extra contributions, and then we'd as well move forward to get a bylaw put in place, which would provide for the recovery from the developing landowners, and to put into place item 3 is to move ahead with the bylaws for the existing residents, that for the $14,000, and to provide for the option for upfront payment, or to go with the loans, and then provide the 3 years for them to hook up. I think that concludes my presentation, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, or members of council, obviously.
All right, thank you very much, Gary. I appreciate that. And if I can ask Daryl to stop sharing so we can have all members here present. If we need to, Daryl, though, please stand by to go back to any frames or cards that might be on that on the minds of members of council. Before I go to members of council, two things. One housekeeping item. We will be having a public meeting following this discussion. While we are going to be wrapping this discussion up about this presentation of the public information session data, and we'll answer some questions. And then following that, we will move to the agenda item for public meeting. Mr. Quamberry, if he's on board right now, he will be coming up after the public meeting. All right, that's a housekeeping item. Okay, there is one other item I do want to bring up before we go to other questions, and that was during your presentation, Gary, I received an email from Mr. Hackett, who was one of the members of the street who asked questions during public participation. And one of the questions inadvertently was missed, if you don't mind me saying. I think it was sent in over the weekend, and perhaps our clerk's office didn't capture that and get it onto the agenda. But I'll just summarize. Basically, Mr. Hackett was asking for why we do not have the minutes available for the public information session number 2 And so that question didn't appear in our agenda, and then made a claim about, us being transparent about this information and wanting full disclosure of information. So I'd like to offer this bit of information, and that is that, again, the public information sessions are not a function of council. They're actually a staff administrative function, so that these folks can, or Ms. Hackett can understand that it's not a staff or not a council function. So the first information session was held virtually because, of course, we're in this COVID situation, and that was the best option to hold the information session as a virtual session. And that did allow participation of a great deal of members of the public, and all the staff were there. The benefit of it being held on Zoom was that it was recorded and is now available for people to go back and take a look at. If we were not in the COVID situation, these public information sessions would be held in person in a room like the council chambers, where boards and information would be available. One-on-one discussions with our experts, whether they be from Watson's or from our staff, our CAO, our engineering team, would all be available to answer questions individually. It is not a formal presentation per se. There would probably be a simple formal presentation, but for you to understand that holding it virtually in no way is a recorded official public meeting. It happens to be recorded as evidence on our website, but it is not in any way an official meeting of council. So the second public information session was held, as the CAO outlined, as a request, so that people could get more information. And the second public information was held so that further information could be shared with members of this street, and that was held. So I'd like to just to refute. I'll get to you in a minute, Madam Clerk. I just want to point out that this has been fully disclosed. It is a private, or it is not a function of council to hold the public information center meetings. It's a part of the planning and part of the engineering studies work. And so this information has been made very, very public and very, very available. Okay, Ms. Clerk, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Measures through you and to the rest of council. Just for clarification, the Hackett's second part of their question did make it to the agenda. It is on as item 4.4. It was just subsequently missed when CAO Ferguson was explaining the first part of the question. So my apologies.
Okay, sorry. No problem. We got it all understood. Thank you. So John, if there's any concern, Mr. Ferguson, you can reach out to Ms. Hackett and have a conversation with her directly if there's any concern. All right, glad we got that clarified. Okay, now that was a very good presentation, Gary and Daryl and Mike Braun as well, members of council. Do you have any questions to our team here? Yes, Mr. McKechnie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so I'm sitting here and we have a developer on one hand and we have a residence on the other hand. So the developer, they want to build Manortown and they're there to make money. That's their investment. They want to make money from the houses that they're building. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. So they're there for an investment. We have the residents on the other hand, and they have an investment in their houses, and they're sitting there on Sunnydale Street. And some of them are using their houses, the investment in their houses, to fund their retirement, their children's education. And some of them probably have reverse mortgages or possibly have reverse mortgages in order to put food on the table. So I'm a little bit uncomfortable with option number one as it stands. So what I'm wondering, if I understand we can't mandate the developer to contribute more money. We've already, they've paid their development charges. We can't ask them to pay more than what the stated development charges are. But can we go back to them and ask them to sharpen their pencils a bit more and see if they can't get the residents' costs down a little bit more? And I'm looking here, $14,000 and change for the residents just for the initial fee, and then another $5,300 to decommission their septic, another up to $20,000 or $10,000, $20,000, something like that, in order to connect. So you're looking at probably another like $30,000. And what I'm wondering is if the developer would kick in another $2,000 per property, that would bring the residents obligation then down to $10,000. I think that might be a little bit more palatable. So as it stands right now, I can't support option number one as it stands without going back to the developer first. I think we have to go back to the developer first and say, look, you guys need to sharpen your pencils a little bit more here. So anyway, those are my thoughts, and I'd be interested to hear what the rest of council have to say. Thank you.
All right, I appreciate your thoughts. I would like to remind you and all members of council that our staff did go back to the development committee and did bring back a reduction from the initial plan. My math showed it was at 58% reduction in the cost, which is pretty significant. I may be wrong, and I would defer to the Watson and Associate experts on this type of thing, but when I looked at the numbers, I was able to surmise it was around 58% reduction. But there is a next step coming forward here, and if there's any other questions from members, I'll take them now, and then I'd like to go to the CAO for next steps. Any other questions from members of council? Yes, Mr. Lamers, I did see your card earlier, just looking to see if there's any more. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Worship. On page 8 of your pages here, you got 8 gray areas. How many of those areas are included in this one? Or is Mortartown got 151 houses, or do some of these other bigger areas have more than one house that they're paying for?
Good. Perhaps Daryl, you could bring up that page, and Gary, you can go ahead with your response.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. All of the gray areas represent the total of the 151 single detached equivalents. So all of those, Manortown is the one that's on the very right-hand side, and all of the ones that are along Highway 26 and are gray, those are all in total 151 SDEs.
John?
All right, yeah, thank you. That's, I was wondering if they were singles or if they were added in the 151.
Yeah. There may be a mix of medium and high density, but everything comes back down to 151. The flows are 151 single detached equivalents.
Mm-hmm. If I can, while this frame is up, John, just interrupt. Gary, when you talk about SDEs, I think it was very early in your presentation. SDEs are also taking into account any type of commercial development and so on. It's used as the engineering calculation. Is that correct, Gary?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. The Burnside have looked at the commercial properties and have looked at their equivalent flows. So we've taken their flows on an SDE equivalent and included it into the calculations as well.
Okay, thank you. John Lamers, anything further?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm not sure if I saw another card or not, and I can't see everyone at this moment. So if somebody, okay, go right ahead. Is there any other cards or anybody have any questions? Yes, and Mike Ron is there. I'm going to go to Mike Ron first. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to clarify something for Councillor McKechnie. We did reach out to find out what the cost would be to actually connect those systems. It was presented in on the slides that were at PIC number 2. So the average connection for a fairly simple connection is $5,000. Pumping out and decommissioning the septic tank is around under $500. So that's the basic what it would cost for an average one. There are some complex ones. They have landscaping concerns. Some have to cross a creek. Those ones, we did also reach out to a directional drill company so they can actually drill pipes underneath all of those features. For landscaping, they can drill a pipe and put it on grade. It's complicated, but that cost is another $5,000 roughly. So typically a basic installation is $5,000 plus a $500 decommissioning and septic pump out. A complex connection is $10,000 with a directional bore machine. And there could be something where they, really extreme, right, distance cross a creek, that maximum extreme may have to put in a small pumping type system in order to accommodate the sewage flows, and that might add another $1,500 or $2,000, but just, I heard numbers like 10,000, 20,000. I just want to make sure that, we're talking about 5 to 10,000 roughly.
Thank you. All right. Did I see another card? Yes, I think Doug McKechnie. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yes, Mike, you're right. I had, my math here wasn't very good. It was 10,000 I had. And for some reason, I added that to some other numbers and I got 20,000. So anyway, but bottom line is that, yeah, I agree. The problem is that we don't know right now what each individual house is going to have to pay. So, I mean, basically they're looking at 15,000 plus. And so, or sorry, 14,000 plus. And so that's my concern, is that there's no, there's no concrete number for them there. To your comments, Mr. Mayor, yes, I agree. The Manortown have been generous, 58% reduction. I think though that it's we need to go back to them and ask them if they can fine tune that a little bit more. And because I still think it's just a little bit too high. I'd like to see it get down closer to the $10,000 mark per resident, because then they're still looking at the plus on top of that. So I think that we need to go back to Manortown and see what they have to say anyway. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else with any questions? All right. Oh, yes, Councillor Broderick. Thank you for popping in there. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, I certainly appreciate what Councillor McKechnie is saying. I have to balance that with, though, every additional cost that the developers every cost that they incur is going to be reflected, as was stated earlier. They're not in this business for fun; they're in it for a profit, and all of those costs are going to be passed on to the new landowners, or to the future owners of whatever is developed. So, like, there's a balance point here. And I think we need to be cognizant of that fact.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. I appreciate the comment. Anybody else? Okay, we're going to go to John Ferguson next. Mr. Ferguson, can you just give me an outline as to what the next steps are in this process? I do appreciate that. Obviously, we're going to need some agreements with our development community, and then bylaws prepared, et cetera. John, what's the next steps?
That's correct, Your Worship. We'll have to finalize the agreement with the developers. There's 4 involved in this particular instance. And once that is solidified, then we can come back to work on the bylaw. We want to get their commitment first as it relates to their donation to the Sunnydale Street, which I think could total in excess of 1.3 million, if I'm not mistaken, in order to put that together. That's really the agreement. They've taken the approach of adding an additional $10,000 to their costs of 151 homes, which, if you do the math. We want to get that agreement in place, make sure it's there, and before we take the next step of creating the bylaw. And that would be the final step, creating the bylaw. We'd have to set up a time. Once we have those agreements in place, we're going to call the council meeting shortly after that. And that would lead to the reading of the bylaw and the subsequent consideration of council for that.
Okay, so we're getting very close, as they say. Okay, did I see a card from the clerk? Hello, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. Measures through you and the rest of council and CAO Ferguson. So Watson and Associates on slide 18 of their presentation have some recommendations before council. I would just like to confirm with CAO Ferguson, Mr. Ron and Mr. Scanlon, if you're looking for council to provide some direction tonight in regards to those recommendations.
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Ferguson and then Mr. Scanlon. John?
Nothing further at this point in time, Your Worship.
Okay. Gary?
I think we're looking for council direction, and we will be back, whether it's formalized in the resolution tonight. I'm not quite sure with your protocols and your procedural bylaws. The recommendation is for us to continue and to be back for really is the bylaw approvals that we'll be looking for in the agreements. But I once again, I leave it to the clerk and to the CAO for the actual functional practices.
Understand, Gary. Thank you. Mr. Ron, is there anything further that the council needs or that you as staff need to bring forward this information?
Thank you, Your Worship. I did have a recommendation, a staff report with recommendations from council to proceed to agreements and potential bylaws in anticipation that, we would get to this point someday. Would have to ask the clerk. I don't have that in front of me or easy access to it. I can find it shortly. Okay. And maybe Sasha can find it faster than I can. But there was a council report from Public Works might have been April of 2021 for Sunnydale Street servicing.
All right, so Madam Clerk, I think the question here is whether there is a motion tonight from this presentation from Watson and our staff, including Don McNulty from RJ Burnside, obviously. Is there a motion that this council needs, or are we at the stage where we're now allowing the staff to continue to prepare this report, which will then bring us a report and a bylaw at another meeting?
Thank you, Mayor Measures, through you to the rest of council. Because I don't have that meeting that Mr. Ron spoke about in regards to the previous report, I would feel comfortable that council does provide some direction tonight, just in case clear direction was not provided in April. If that's what Mr. Ron and Mr. Scanlon need from Watson Associates to move forward with presenting some financial agreements and some bylaws for council's consideration.
Okay, that brings me some clarity. Mr. Ferguson, and then any members of council. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Don.
thank you. Bring clarity to the question that was asked to me previously. When you asked me the next steps would require council to give us direction to proceed to finalizing the agreements with the developers. And then we can bring that back as part of our report to council that would lead to the bylaw. So those are the next steps. So that's really the required resolution of council, is to give us directions to proceed with finalizing the agreements with the developers.
All right, then thank you. I'll ask the clerk to prep something up while I ask for Mr. Patterson to go ahead. Tom?
Yeah, just the thought in all of this, as we're getting down to the final estimates, is there any benefit to the homeowners to have the township contractor, when they put the sewage systems in up to the property line, to carry it as a lump, to have the township finish the connection to the house with the contractor? Is there some efficiencies there? I know the nature of this thing is the system may be installed and the connections may happen whenever the timeline that we've put in place, within a year or 2 or 3 years, whatever. But has anyone explored the efficiencies of doing something like that?
That's a good question. I think it was brought up at the public information session. Mike, I think you answered that at one point. Do you want to comment on that?
See, I would prefer Don McNulty's joined us tonight, Your Worship, and can explain this much better than I can. And for the clerk, March 8th, 2021, PW 006, 2021. It basically gives us direct staff to provide financing options for council's consideration at a future meeting. So if you could look at that and give us your thoughts on direction, I appreciate it.
All right, Don, can you answer the question in regards to Councillor Patterson noticed the efficiencies if the township was involved in doing some of those private connections?
So this question did come up at least at PIC number 2, that the in-person session, and it was pointed out that the municipality cannot actually enter into a contract for the work that is done on private property. But I think Gary actually mentioned at the meeting that he knew of other municipalities where they actually did help the citizens, the homeowners coordinate so they could put it out in a package. But the actual final agreement between the contractor and the homeowner had to be between them and not involve the township. But there is a possibility that the municipality could help coordinate, sort of a multiple unit connection work if that was desired by the citizens.
Good point, Tom.
Could you bring back some numbers that would allow us to consider it?
John?
It's a great question. We can't actually do the tendering of it. We can help them with putting their tender together. We can guide them, but it has to be a tender to the community group on Sunnydale Street.
Yeah.
And I think there's definite efficiencies that could be met even at the public meeting when you discuss the fact that somebody would have to bring a backhoe and float it in and float it out. That's something that they wouldn't have to continuously do for each project. They could keep it right there. And there's I think some savings with a joint process on procuring a contractor for the homeowners, but we can't be the respondents. We can assist them, or sorry, we can't be the respondents. We can't be the respondents. We would have to allow them to be in control of the tender process, and they would pick the company that had the best price and the best work or the best value. It will be up to them. It would not be up to us or the municipality.
So is that an understanding or that we could bring back?
Yeah, we would certainly be willing to work with them in that regard. There's going to be a bit of a process here. It'll be another year or at least another construction year before work could start. And then working out the connections for their property. It gives us time to work with the citizens, and we would actively be willing to do that. They would have to want us to do it, and we'd be willing to do it to help them out.
Thank you.
Yes, Don, go ahead.
And through your worship to the rest of council, and there would have to be an agreement on timing, like they would have to then occur. It may take away the advantage of being able to connect in 3 years because they would have to occur concurrently at the same time for that to provide any efficiencies.
For a significant number. I mean, you would think of the 77, some could opt out and they miss on a more efficient price.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tom, I would suggest, Councillor Patterson, perhaps this is might be a separate item as to whether or not our staff can help provide the guidance and engineering review of something like that, or the procurement review. But it like has been laid out. I don't see how we could be the respondent as Mr. Ferguson did. So I'm not sure exactly how we would be able to manage that as a council underneath our procedures. I'm just thinking out loud. Tom, what do you think?
Well, I like the idea that we, as the experts, we can provide advice. I don't see why a municipality couldn't advise to the Sunnydale group. Sunnydale group meets, sees the value of doing this. And if there was numbers that were sufficiently large enough to make a difference, then they would go about doing it. And my request would be for Mike and his crew to assist them in any way, to let the tender and choose the contractors, give them a list of the ones that they would work with, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Ron?
Thank you, Your Worship. One thing I would caution council, absolutely, we will help people figure this out and, ensure that they know proper process, right? Have a contractor with insurance. If we put a tender out, it's going to require bonding, probably the use of plumbers to protect the municipality from, any risk. You don't necessarily have to be a licensed plumber to install a sanitary service. Or contractors that do this. They do have to meet the plumbing inspection. I think the best bet here is we will assist with with suggestions and help through the process. I don't think we want to make it so detailed that we're issuing a contract or a tender to get this work done.
No, I don't think we're suggesting that, just as we're talking through this. If it can all be done as a private contract by the Sunnydale residents, they might hire someone to help them do it themselves. But we certainly could coordinate with them and assist them. And if like right now, I don't even know if it's a good idea. So from a cost point of view, that's where I see the benefit coming. So if it would be a significant cost reduction of that $5,000 to $10,000, cut it in half, let's say, for the sake of a discussion, then they might be interested in pursuing.
Can I suggest to the CAO, when we get to the point where we have a report with a bylaw, that a supplementary report be attached that has outlining some of the fees that we're proposing that council will consider to cancel or remove on this project, and that information, as the councillor suggests, would include the services that we could provide in reviewing any community contract or community organization that does that. Would that be fair to ask for a supplemental report that would go along with the report that Mr. Watson the Watson and Associates team have been putting together? John, how does that sound to you?
It sounds fine to me. You're talking about the potential. We will be coming to council to ask that council consider waiving, the permit fees and stuff along
inspection
that
fees, those type of things. Yes.
That I think we would have either in the report or as a subsequent report. I would suggest that we may just comment that, subject to, being agreeable to citizens on Sunnydale Street, that we would help them with their tendering process. We could make that comment, but not to force ourselves on them. But if they want us to help, we would certainly like to help them.
Okay, I put it in a report and bring it to council. I think it would be good, as Tom's pointed out, to have to have this included somewhere, because I think it's good advice for the residents and can provide them the guidance that they may need for this.
Yeah, I think we'll make a comment on it, and that'll give us time to work out the arrangements with the citizens later.
Great. All right, where are we? Anybody else? Looks like we're going to go back to the clerk. Madam Clerk, have you got something for us?
Thank you, Mayor Measure. Just one moment, I'm going to bring it up.
Oh,
so
okay.
looking back at the March 8th meeting minutes that Mr. Ron had spoke to, so that's given council the direction to proceed up to this point. Part 3 of that recommendation was direct staff provide financing options for council's consideration at a future meeting, which staff and our consultants have done. To proceed forward with the financial agreements and to prepare a bylaw, I believe staff's looking and our consultants are looking for the recommendation that's been added as slide 18 to the presentation. So I will read that out to council. So the recommendation that's being proposed is, be it resolved that council of the Township of Clearview hereby directs staff to proceed with option 1, wastewater servicing of whole area plus road urbanization and water main upgrade, and direct staff to proceed with the preparation of financial agreements with developing landowners, and direct staff to prepare bylaws under section 391 of the Municipal Act for recovery from existing residents. And just as a note to context, and I believe Watson's can confirm or deny this, that I believe part 1 of that recommendation to proceed forward with an option will let them know how to prepare that bylaw under section 391, because I believe they have to add costs into that bylaw as well. I don't know if Mr. Scanlon can confirm that, or Mr. Abs.
Mr. Abs, Mr. Scanlon?
Yeah, I think it's correct. We would incorporate the amounts in there.
Okay. So, Madam Clerk, are you comfortable then with what you've prepared then? You've got it, you got the information?
Correct. So if you want to proceed with getting a mover and a seconder for that motion.
All right. Members of council, you've heard the motion as presented. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder on the motion. Mr. Lamers, Mr. Broderick, Mr. Lamers and Mr. Broderick. And is there any other questions? Should we have the motion reread again, just for everybody's comfort? Barry's shaking his head. Okay. We're comfortable with it. Everyone's comfortable? All right. No further questions. I'm prepared to call the motion. Members of council, motion's been made. It's been moved and seconded. I'm prepared to call. All those in favor? Any opposed? That'll carry. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you. And so we expect a report at a future meeting. We didn't have a date on that, so I would suggest to Mr. Ferguson and the clerk that you prepare a date and advise council, and we can have that out there so we know when that might be available. And at this time, I'd like to thank Mr. Scanlon and Mr. Abs for their work on this project to date. I know that you'll continue to work with our staff on this project as we move it forward. And so thank you very much for joining us tonight at the meeting.
Our pleasure, Mr. Mayor.
All the best.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Okay, council, we're going to move to our public meeting. Our public meeting is scheduled for 6:30 or after 6:30. It can't be held before 6:30. So we're going to move to our public meeting portion of our agenda. And as is our procedure, I'll pass the chair over to the Deputy Mayor for the public meeting in regards to a communications tower. Mr. Deputy Mayor, you have the chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate that. We will now initiate the public meeting portion of tonight's agenda. We thank everyone who provided written comments ahead of tonight's public meeting. If you wish to be notified of the decision of the Corporation of the Township of Clearview on an application being discussed this evening, please contact the planning person in charge of the file. The information will be provided in this presentation. As identified in the notice of public meeting, please be advised that your written comments or request to be notified will form part of the public record. Your communication and any personal information therein will be made available to the public unless you expressly request its removal. If a person or public body does not make written submission to the township with respect to the proposed applications before a decision is made or a bylaw is passed, they are not entitled to appeal the decision to the local appeal tribunal and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. The following public meeting will involve a brief presentation by our planning staff, including a brief explanation of the written comments received, an opportunity for the applicant or their agent to present their application and respond to the written comments, and an opportunity for questions by council. We'll now begin with the public meeting with respect to file number 2021-071-6263-3334 Side Road. And I believe Miss Workman is going to be presenting that. So Rosalind, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And if you just bear with me, I'll put my presentation on the screen. Can everyone see that?
You're good.
Good, thank you. So as Deputy Mayor mentioned, we are at a public meeting tonight for Telecommunication Tower file 2021-071, and it is located on the property known as 6263-3334 Side Road. So the proposal is that Signum Wireless is proposing a 50-meter lattice tri-tower pole on the subject lands, and the tower will be a multi-carrier telecommunication tower. This tower will be located on the town line between Clearview Township and Wasaga Beach. The subject property is close to the Highway 26 roundabout. The tower is proposed to be located approximately 8 meters from the west property line on the subject lands, and the radio equipment shelter is approximately 9 meters from the west property line, behind the existing house on the subject lands. None of the proposed structures will be located in the environmental protection or EP zone. This is a map just showing the subject lands as being 6263-3334 Side Road, and they are shown in the hatched gray and black colors. This is an air photo of the site, and there is a red circle around the approximate location of the tower. This is the site plan that's been submitted by the applicants. Again, the proposed location for the compound of the telecommunication tower area is outlined in yellow, and the proposed actual location of the tower is in a circle that is red, and the same on the larger blow up. This is a photo rendering showing the before and after shots of the property, with showing the tower in the background behind the shed and house. Existing policy framework is that the current Township of Clearview official plan designation is agricultural, and the current zoning bylaw categories are agricultural exception AG-10, and environmental protection EP, and hazard land overlay FP. And just as a note, the AG-10 stands for, it recognizes that this subject land is has a minimum lot area of 1.9 hectares. This just shows a map of the official plan designation showing the agricultural designation on the subject lands. This is the existing zoning bylaw map, again showing the approximate location of the property being in red. There is a significant amount of the lands that are environmentally protected, and no development is proposed in that area. Notice in circulation. Notice of this public meeting for telecommunication tower has been given in accordance with the township telecommunication protocol, and that was done on September 30th, 2021. It was done through mailing of the notice, and that mail out was to all properties within 500 meters of the subject lands, as well it was published in the local newspapers. Details of this application and the supporting materials have also been made available to the public and have been circulated to the relevant commenting agencies. This is a circulation map showing 500 meters from the subject land. So they are actually located in that yellow color. The subject lands are shown in the red, sort of red outline. It isn't actually showing, I guess the gray is actually showing the lands that were circulated to the adjacent town of Wasaga Beach. And how to get involved. So Signum Wireless invites comments or inquiries about this proposal by mail or email or fax. Comments should be received by 5 p.m. on November the 1st of 2021. Comments can be made to the township staff, the Fontour International or Signum Wireless, and Industry Canada. At this time, I did want to mention that I have received one set of written comments from John Van Size. Mr. Van Size lives at 6486, and he is concerned and does not support the proposed tower. He is worried that there hasn't been enough investigation done on the sharing of this type of infrastructure on other towers in the area. And he's also wondering if they could increase the height of existing towers in the area. He wonders also if there's been an alternative site considered for this tower. He is mainly concerned that his farm property could be impacted negatively due to this proposed tower being so close to his property line, especially in the event of a catastrophic structure failure. Is there a process in place that the owner of the tower provides proof of liability insurance to the surrounding impacted property owners, and if this proposed tower is built? It is his opinion that there are more suitable locations existing in the area if it is deemed necessary to build a new communication tower in infrastructure in the Highway 26 corridor. He does have some concerns for the impacts of the telecommunication tower, and they are as follows. He's worried that the tower will affect the natural groundwater, freshwater aquifer in the area. He's worried that soils and materials surrounding the foundation of the telecommunication tower will be impacted by water erosion. He is worried that the transceiver force field studies that have documented proof of affecting cattle and other ruminant livestock. He is worried that the tower is to be set back a minimum as much or more than the height of the tower from buildings. So in other words, it's very close to buildings and it's not set back the height of that tower, which is 50 meters. He is worried that the proposed tower protocols have not been met and have been not followed. He's worried that the installation of this magnitude is an aggravation to his farm and cattle and other species. Waves and noise interception is enhanced because of the cattle's large ears. And as a result, the hum of the tower has a negative impact on breeding stock, on his breeding stock, his cattle. He's worried that the transceivers will affect birds, bats, bees, cattle, and other species. Towers have especially had an impact on the sparrow bird species, affecting eggs and embryos. They have also affected the little brown bat. Towers are also linked to the colony collapse disorder among bees, resulting in the vanishing of hives. The Van Size have property abutting the east and west properties of the designated location of the proposed tower. There are visual eye pollution factors that decrease value of properties and neighboring properties. The tower will impede passerby vehicles as a major distraction, as well as helicopters and military planes, police, and aerial searches. Towers attract an increase in additional lighting strikes. And historically, the environmental protected forest in this location canvasses many tall pine trees. Taller trees have an increased likelihood of being hit by lightning. Further, this would then increase the lightning activity in the area because of the introduction of a telecommunication tower. And this will also then be detrimental to livestock. And finally, cancer studies are ongoing, exploring the concerns of the RF waves, heat body temperature, and tissues as a result of these towers. And I did, just as a note, circulate these comments to all of council, as well as the applicant, and they will be made available on the website as well. If people are interested that are watching that would like to provide further comment, here is the Signum contact. Here is the Industry Canada contact. This is my contact information. And just as part of, just to go over where we are in terms of this review process, we're currently having the public meeting. Staff will consider comments received. There will be a recommendation report that will go to council. However, it is noted that because it is a telecom tower, there is no formal notice given to the public. It is given to the applicant when council makes a decision on the telecommunication tower concurrence with our telecommunication tower protocol. And that concludes my presentation for tonight. I just stopped sharing.
Thank you, Ross. And I believe we have somebody from Signum Wireless want to do a presentation as well. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Burton. For you and to the rest of council, we have Brendan Chu from Frontier International, and they are going to make a presentation on behalf of the applicant. Brendan, you can turn on your camera and unmute your mic.
Hi, thank you, Madam Clerk and Deputy Mayor. It will actually be my colleague Valerie who will be presenting.
Do we have Here she is. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Okay. Welcome.
Um,
You have the floor.
Yes. Rosalind, could you please, do you want to share the presentation or should I?
Valerie, if you would like, I can share the presentation. If you would just like me, tell me when you want to move slides, if that makes it easier.
Yep.
Okay,
for sure.
just one moment, please.
Okay, perfect. And everyone can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. My name is Valerie, and I'm a planner working at Vonter International, representing Signum Wireless interest in a proposed telecommunication tower in Stayner at 6263 Side Road 33 and 34 Mississauga. I also have my colleague here with me, Brendan. And Vonter is a planning consultancy company that specializes in telecommunication towers, and we have been hired by Signum Wireless to oversee the planning process for this application. Next slide. So this is the agenda for tonight. We will have a presentation about the proposed telecommunication tower, followed by the opportunity to hear some comments on the project. All comments that are submitted to Rosalind or directly to myself will be included in our public consultation summary report to the township. And then during this meeting, we hope to provide some more information about what wireless networks are. And additionally, we will be discussing the specifics of the project, such as the site selection process, the status of the planning application, and the tower design. So Signum Wireless is a Canadian next slide. Signum Wireless is a Canadian third-party tower builder for wireless industries. Many of the towers that Signum constructs, including the one proposed in Stayner, will allow for co-location, meaning that up to 3 carriers may locate their services on a single tower. The mission and goal of Signum Wireless is to reduce tower proliferation by strategically locating well-planned and designed sites. Next slide. Now we will move into some general background information on wireless networks. A wireless network can be thought of as a series of interconnected parts with base stations and antennas working together to create a network. When providing their services, these networks create coverage areas which provide telecommunications services, and when adequately placed, they provide continuous wireless service across an area. Next slide. These networks only service a fixed number of calls and data requests. If there is an increased number of calls, for instance, the network's capacity is reduced to provide service to the closest signals. To solve these problems and to provide adequate telecommunication services, these gaps need to be filled by constructing new telecommunication towers. Next slide. It is important to build new towers for telecommunication purposes, as wireless technology is responsible for delivering a number of essential communication services, such as EMS, fire and police service reception, voice and data, internet services, internet streaming, and even business needs, as there's an increasing number of people working from home. Next slide. So in this application, Signum Wireless is proposing a 50-meter lattice tripole style telecommunication tower. And in the image here, it shows where it would be located. The slide breaks down the planning process and where we are. The pre-consultation and formal application have been submitted to the township, and we are currently in the public consultation phase. The next step is a public consultation summary report, which will be provided to the township. It is the township's decision whether they provide concurrence for this telecommunication tower, and the final approval authority is Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, otherwise known as ISED. Next slide. So here's a map of the current telecommunications infrastructure in Stayner. There is a huge gap here right in the middle, and all existing infrastructure is located about 2 kilometers away from the center of the search area, and much of it is concentrated along the waterfront. If you look closely to the bell tower closest to the yellow pin on the left, that is about 25 meters tall, and the bell tower located to the right of the yellow pin is about 68 meters tall. The next slide. Here is the map just showing how far it would be from the closest residential. Next slide. Here is a view from side road 3334 looking southbound. Next slide. And here's a photo simulation of what it would approximately look like. Next slide. And this is the same road, except it's looking slightly southwest. Next slide. Next slide. So Safety Code 6, which is maintained by Health Canada, is the standard that governs the limit of human exposure to electromagnetic fields for any broadcasting endeavor in Canada. It was first published in 1979 and is consistently being revised. It has also been revised in 2015. The next slide. So we believe that wireless services in Stayner needs upgrading to serve current and future needs. This one tower will be able to accommodate up to 3 carriers, preventing tower proliferation in and around Stayner. The next slide. We would like to provide the township with the public consultation summary report, which includes all public feedback. So please submit your feedback as soon as possible. Additionally, you may contact the township planner working on this application. Also direct any health and safety concerns to ISED, which would be the federal department responsible for monitoring telecommunication towers. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, is there anybody from the public that has asked to speak at this meeting tonight?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Burton. Yes, we have 2 members of the public who wish to make oral submissions on this application. The first is Lucia Rando. So if you just bear with me, I'm just going to bring them in as a participant to the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Lucia. You're now a participant in the meeting. You can turn on your microphone and your camera.
Hello?
Rando, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Can you turn? Oh, there you are. Okay, perfect. You have the floor. You're welcome to make your comments, please. Please go ahead.
Okay. My question is, first I hear about the question was from the other person before me about the, it can be, what's it, now I don't remember. It can be radioactive, it can be effect to our kids when they play there. It can be effect even when I wanted to plant like vegetable and stuff in my property. This wire connect with the tower. I don't know if you understand the way I speak. Is it affected? Is it damage to the vegetable, to our healthy, to play the kids on the ground? Is it radioactive when our kids there collect flower, collect stuff growing in the land? Also, I wanted to ask, this increase over the, also I want to ask, is it increase on the property tax because this project, you go ahead and do it with the wire? Is it more increase in our property tax? Or because it's gonna be built this tower, we're gonna sleep in the tent sometime. It's gonna be affected storm and lighting. It's attract more lighting from it is now. At this moment, I get nervous. I don't know.
Okay, how about if I get them to answer some of your questions, and then if you think of another question, you can go ahead. So, which Valerie or Brendan, do you want to respond to Ms. Rando's comments?
I can start.
Please do.
So your first part of your comments regarding just health and safety and children and vegetation. What I can say is that Health Canada regulates health and safety for telecommunication towers and radio frequency emissions. They consistently review the material on an ongoing basis and update Safety Code 6 accordingly, which all telecommunication services have to follow. We're not scientific experts, so that's as much as we can speak on that topic. And then regarding the increase in property taxes, we take on all costs.
Can I understand the answer you about the health and safety? If any vegetable, we grow some vegetable, or my grandkids play there, or we play there, is my concern is the radioactive is more frequent than now. Now isn't, we don't have this tower, all this wire. It will be, it's like landed with no contamination, like, or no radioactive.
If I can sort of speak here. So what Valerie has said is the Canadian government has standards set that all communication towers have to meet. So these communication towers have, these standards have been reviewed by the government so as they do not create any dangers to public health or public safety or environmental issues as they stand. I think that's probably what Valerie was trying to explain. And as far as property taxes goes, your property tax would not be affected, but certainly the tower that gets built, the landowner, the tower will pay additional commercial taxes to the township, but it will not affect your taxes.
What do they offer to us? The telecommunication, whoever built this tower, what the price they give it to us?
Oh, okay. Valerie, I'll let you, or Brendan, I'll let you respond to that.
Are they gonna give us light? Are they gonna give a clean road, all these bushes are gonna be more take care of the land there? No.
Yeah, go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah, so I could speak to that. So I mean, the monetary compensation is obviously a confidential number between the landlord and the and our Signal Wireless. But in terms of what they provide, I mean, in addition to the increased coverage for cellular, they will take care of the compound. They I believe they go once every quarter just to make sure, you know, the compound's okay and you know, the tower structure is safe. And then also they are constantly monitoring it. So if there are any, you know, abnormalities at the location, they will go out at that time and check to make sure everything's okay. So, I mean, they will take care of the compound, but in terms of additional services to the surrounding area, like cleaning the roads and stuff outside of the construction portion of it, I don't believe that there are any other additional benefits.
Did you have any other questions?
No, not this moment. No.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. And we have, you're welcome to stay with us while we hear, I believe, because we have another person who wants to ask some questions. So, Madam Clerk, if you could
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Burton. So we have one last public participation, and that's John Van Size. I'm just promoting him as a participant. So just one moment, please. Mr. Van Size, you're in the meeting now. You can turn on your microphone and your camera.
Here you go, Mr. Van Sice. Welcome to the public meeting. You have the floor to ask questions if you wish.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity, and it's good to see the council is hard at work and the mayor as well. This code 6 that was discussed, it's a work in progress, and there's other jurisdictions that have different slants on that. There's studies done in Okotoks in Alberta, and the setbacks at this proposed site are just not enough. Okotoks states that it should be 3 times the height of the towers if they're less than 15 meters. At least 75 meters away, 15 to 30 meters in height, and 100 meters away, 31 to 45, 122, 46 to 55. Well, this tower, they're proposing to locate it on a property that in their brochure, all the state it was the length of the property and the frontage. They never mention the width, and the tower is taller than the width where they're locating it. And I have property on both sides, east and west, and in case of a catastrophic collapse of the tower, and I refer back to CKVR when a plane hit it, and that was back in the 70s, I believe. That could happen here. Visual flight rules, planes always come up that our piece of property over our bush, and it would be right in the road, this tower. The tower is really twice the height of the industry standard, which is around 75 feet. And if you add the height of this tower above the lake, you're talking about a 200-foot exposure over lake level. That is absolutely gigantic. And also, they state that they don't have to do an environmental assessment. But that property is located on the eastern boundaries of the mountain water flow. And there's wells along there that have had 125 gallons a minute production. The Alliston Aquifer begins over on 26 south towards Stainer. So it's a different soil structure. And because it's on the eastern boundary of that mountain flow water, there's a lot of alluvial soil and silt and clay and some of a different kind of sand that doesn't accept water very easily. There's a lot of water goes through that area. It's prone to flooding. And if you had a big storm, there would be big issues with the flooding. Now, to put a tower with that height in that location, if you look northwest, the predominant water or wind flows that way. It would be very difficult for that tower to maintain its position and not have even go over. And if it did, then it's going to affect the road because the force going down. To put it in perspective, Highway 26, the new 26 from Wasaga Beach to Collingwood, the Ministry of Transport here in Ontario had that slated to go through several of our farms. I went to the open house and I talked to the engineers and I explained that they were above on an elevation and the wind is higher up here and there's been lots of huge snowstorms and wind events, and that that would be detrimental to traffic because there's no doubt they would have accidents. And they said, where would you put it? And I said, I'd put it in the bush country where the bush would absorb the wind. And they listened to me. This tower being 164 feet high, with the wind exposure to it, it's just a recipe for waiting to happen. And maybe the Department of Transport federally would listen to that too. We have a livestock operation, and these kind of gamma rays and stuff that comes off of this tower has been proven to affect cattle. I've known situations where cattle have not even conceived because of the exposure. We run a 150-year-old enterprise here. Van sizes have been on this land, and our family, every inch that we own has been family land for a very long time. But since 1872, in 2 months, it'll be 150 years in one location. And this has the potential to basically destroy our operation. If we can't use our land for the purposes that we need, we're out of business. We have land on both sides of them, and there's an approach on the east side that actually is a shared approach, although I don't use it, but it encompasses our property on the east side as well. So that's their access to that property, but the property is just too small for what they're trying to do. And Fontour has said that they had other property owners were not interested. Well, there's probably good reason. And this area is known for its vistas and whatever. That would certainly be a mar on the landscape. And they've also said that, sure, that they want to put 3 transceivers on it, but at the same time, they've left the door open to put more. And a lot of these studies that have been done are ongoing works, and they've shown that the effects of these towers will heat tissue. You councilors are aware of the little brown bat in this area, and we have a healthy population compared to Collingwood and other areas. This will affect them because it destroys their sense of positioning, etc. Bees are needed with the farm to pollinate crops and whatever, and bees can't handle this either. So we've stepped aside over the years and accepted things from that society needs. The highway, for example, the main natural gas line, the main fiber optics line, the hiking trail, the water line, main hydro line, basically through our property. It's on the road allowance, that's true. Those we could work around. This tower we cannot. It's not just another nail in the coffin of local agriculture. This is a huge spike in our farm operation. And there's the city of Hamilton has respected the needs of agriculture in rural areas, and they've been that website is in the paper that we sent into Ms. Workman,
And they've actively worked on not just mitigation, but the idea of what harm these towers and stuff can do. Hamilton's a big municipality, and for them to take that step indicates that people are actually interested in food security and agriculture. And last time I checked, Clearview, probably as big as industry, and I think it is as big as industry, is agriculture. The Highway 120 or 26 corridor acts as a barrier between urban and rural, and this has jumped right over the barrier. Fontour has said that the area is going to be developed, or well, we may have something to say about that, but you take future development, you can say the moon and Mars is open for future development. But I don't think either of those two properties would feed people, not at this point anyway. So
So
this is an issue for us.
Mr. Van Zyst, can we maybe give the foreign two people an opportunity to respond to some of your comments, please?
Let them go to it.
Yeah. Valerie or Brendan, which of you two would like to respond to some of the comments or questions asked?
I can start, and there was a lot said, so maybe Brendan can jump in here and there if I miss anything. I took some notes here. So regarding the setbacks that were mentioned for the town of Okotoks, we understand that we put up a lot of towers in Ontario, and each municipality or township may have different requirements in terms of setbacks. And, you know, somewhere it might be 50 meters, somewhere it's 10 meters, but we were not told of any setback requirements for us. The only setback requirement we face is with the MTO, and they have reviewed our file and want us to apply for a permit. And that's the extent of that. In terms of a catastrophic collapse, I mean, we do understand like your property is right adjacent to our proposed land. And we'd like to say that, you know, all drawings are stamped by engineers, they're approved before any construction ever happens. We have soil reports that are ordered. We have a wind report that's ordered from Environment Canada to make sure that all safety standards are followed. And then in terms of the planes you mentioned, when any structure goes up in Canada, we are obliged to apply to NAV Canada and Transport Canada. And we send in our information, you know, this is how tall the tower is, these are the coordinates, this is the type of tower we want to build. And they decide, okay, do you need to add any sort of lighting, any sort of painting so it's visible by any air traffic? And both NAB and TransCanada have responded to us with clearances for this project in terms of safety requirements. And then in terms of an environmental assessment, yes, at the federal level, we are exempt, but in terms of the provincial level, we are not exempt. So the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority was informed of our tower project, and we were made aware that there is environmental protection land on the same property, and we made sure to move it outside of the environmental protection land. And that's about it from my end. Brendan, do you have anything to add?
Brendan, was there anything you wanted to add, Brendan?
No, I think that Valerie covered most of it, unless also I missed a question here or there. But one thing I did want to add is that in terms of if there is a catastrophic event of any kind for whatever reason, despite all of the safety precautions that we take during construction or before construction, that any issues would, the liability would fall on Signum, and it would fall under their insurance. So it wouldn't cost, I guess, any surrounding areas, although I do understand that the worry of, if it were to fall on your property, of course, it would damage your property at the time, but then the insurance from Signum would, cover it with how insurance works.
Do you have any other specific questions, Mr. Van Zyst, that you'd like to ask?
Well, a tower that high will attract lightning. Look at the CN Tower in Toronto. I know it's a lot shorter than that, but it is the highest, would be the highest point in the whole area. And lightning has affected that area. I've lived here all my life. We have lost cattle because lightning hit trees in the bush and jumped to the fence. And that would be a catastrophic problem. Now, the problem is with a lot of what these people have said, a lot of it is what they've told the powers to be. And I don't think it's gone far enough. I mean, sure, you get something like that, they're all, we're sorry, we've got too much wind, we've got this is what's happened, we'll mitigate it, we'll pay out insurance, we'll do all that. It's just not the right place for it because the property is not big enough to handle a tower of that size. It's just ridiculous.
Thank you. So Brendan, maybe you can answer this, or Valerie. Is it safe to assume that all your towers are properly grounded and dealt with should they be struck by, because I'm sure there's thousands of dollars of equipment on those towers that you want protected as well should they get hit by lightning?
Right, yeah, so thank you, Deputy Mayor. That is what I was going to mention, is that all of our towers are equipped with lightning rods, and if they are struck by lightning, they're grounded, and so the lightning would travel down and be dispersed into the ground, as opposed to hitting nearby trees and causing fires or having it jump wherever. With it hitting our tower, it would actually ground the strike, which although I'm not an expert, I can't say, and I can't be quoted, but just off the top of my head, I believe it might be safer than it just striking a tree and going whichever way that nature dictates.
Right. Thank you. Okay. So Mr. Van Zyst, unless you have a specific question to ask, I'm going to go to council for any questions.
To state one thing.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Cattle have 8 points of reference to the ground. They're cloven hoof. They're very, very susceptible to lightning.
Okay, thank you for that comment. And thank you for attending tonight, Mr. Van Zyst. I am now going to go to council and ask if there's any member of council that has any questions or comments they'd like to make. Councillor McKechnie, followed by his worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First of all, just a comment. It's been my experience in aviation. I don't think this 50-foot tower will have an effect on aviation, but I know that the proponents here have gone to Transport Canada and NAVCAD, and they have they've gone through the proper route on that. But I hate to. Sometimes I feel like I'm the grumpy old man here at council. So my question is to the proponents, or maybe to Rosalind, you're coming here, you come to council every few months for a new tower. And we always hear this, we got to put this tower up, and it's got to be a certain height because it's going to work to reduce tower proliferation. We're going to be putting other users will be able to be on this tower. And then I look at your slide here, slide number 8, and you've got Rogers and Bell, Rogers and Bell, Rogers and Bell. Like, how many of these towers are actually used by more than one company? On the one that I think it's slide 8, current telecommunications infrastructure and Stainer. So Rogers and Bell, those towers, how many are used by more than one company?
Anybody from Frontier want to respond to that, or?
For sure. Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. Out of the hundreds and thousands that we see across Canada, I mean, Bell and Rogers are, pardon me, technically separate entities. So they are two separate companies that are using the tower. In addition, there are some instances where, for example, TELUS uses Bell's infrastructure on this end of Canada, and in the West, Bell piggybacks onto TELUS's infrastructure. So in this case, wherever Bell builds, TELUS also has coverage. And in terms of what our database is showing, it's only showing telecommunication companies. It's not really showing like the smaller internet companies or WISPs, as some of them are known as, that might go on the tower, because we specialize more in telecommunications. So if this tower were to be built, it wouldn't be limited to telecommunication companies, but also internet companies, if they are interested, can go on to the tower. I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to let me know, and hopefully I can address it properly.
No, you know what, I mean, that's fine. It's just that, we have someone usually coming to us every few months wanting to put a tower in, and, we get the same spiel from everybody. So, it's almost word for word. And everybody says, oh, we got to build this tower, otherwise, and we have to build it so high so that we can put more users on it. Otherwise, you're going to have tower proliferation. But we don't have anyone come back to us afterwards and say, hey, a year ago we put this tower up, and now we have 3 users on it, and thank you very much. Otherwise we would have had 3 towers. So there's no one coming back to us and telling us, whether there are more users on the towers. All I do see is tower proliferation. So anyway, thank you very much for the presentation.
And so I'm going to call on our fire chief, if I may. Rory, are you there?
Yes, I am, Deputy Mayor.
There you go. Do we not use for our fire department communications, do we not have some stuff located on some of these towers?
So we have 3 of our own towers that we utilize, one of which is in Duntroon, one is in Creemore, and the other one is behind the New Lowell Fire Hall. It's a combined tower with the Public Works, and we've just recently added some repeater stuff for the fire department as well. So those are the 3 that we utilize.
Could that be an option for us to use some of these towers, and if we need to expand our systems or anything?
You know what, and I have to admit, certainly not an expert in the field. I think with some consultation with our service provider point to point, that question could certainly be better answered. But I do know once you get into towers and space and things of that issue, there certainly is other parameters that do come into play here.
Great. Thank you. Your worship, you had your hand up. Please go ahead.
I did. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, Mr. Chair. One of my questions has already been answered, and thank you for bringing that to the fire chief. I do have a question, though, and that is simply, well, a question and an observation. I'll give my observation first. My observation is that we've had an awful lot of, as the Councillor McKechnie points out, towers being proposed across Clearview Township, and yet these towers are being proposed that are adjacent to our neighboring municipalities, such as we had a tower proposal for halfway between Ottawa and Collingwood, and it was specifically designed to provide service to Collingwood, and yet it's in Clearview. And so we had another tower installed down on County Road 10, which is specifically designed to provide internet coverage into the north side of Base Borden, and the federal government are using it. And then so this tower, how conveniently it's located immediately adjacent to the town of Wasaga Beach and a location of a future casino site that's being built in the town of Wasaga Beach. And so I want to just point out as my observation that yet again, here we are at Clearview receiving applications for tower infrastructures that are not serving our community. And so I would put it to Fontour or to Sigma or whoever was watching that they should seriously consider putting a tower in Ottawa. They should be putting a tower in Brentwood. They should be putting a tower, close to where the urban centers are of our community that desperately need better cell phone and internet coverages. Certainly during the pandemic, as your mayor, I have heard over and over and over again how we need better internet coverage across our community. Certainly some of our areas are improving. And so I just want to put that commentary out there. But I would like to ask this question to the Fontour folks, and that is that, can you give me an idea as to why you chose this particular location, given that it is significantly an agricultural area? And is there data to support that the cell phone coverage or the data coverage between the towers you outline in your map, as McKechnie pointed out on page 8, is there a dropout in calls? To be honest, I use both a Rogers phone and a Bell phone, and I've never had any trouble driving through the roundabout there on Highway 26. So is there a reason why you chose that location?
I could start off just by answering the previous question and your observation. We do understand that, you get a lot of these tower applications, but in terms of a bit of a more proactive approach in our justification report, we did include other future sites that we are eyeing in terms of telecommunication applications that we haven't started yet, but we wanted to show the planner that this is the network we're trying to fill in the coverage gaps. So if you, Rosalind can show you that map as well. And then in terms of, it's a little hard to talk about network coverage and municipal boundaries because it's a very gray area. It's not that any sense that we're trying to discourage or not provide coverage. It's just we do the planning part and the site acquisition specialists work with the radio frequency engineers and homeowners to see what areas would allow a tower. And this area was mostly chosen because of the gap in between the two closest towers.
Okay, I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. If I can, I would like to point out that Councillor Lamers down in New Lowell, you'll find that there are 3 very significant telecommunications towers all through New Lowell, and yet the fiber providers are now installing fiber. So we've got, as Councillor McKechnie points out, tower proliferation happening. We certainly see it. And yet now we're getting a tower application in front of us that's going to be on agricultural land. That's clearly, in my opinion, is providing that direction of service towards another urban area, which is immediately adjacent to it. So frankly, why did Fontour or Sigma not apply for their application in the town of Wasaga Beach?
Did Valerie or Brendan, did you want to respond to that, or? No comment.
Well, I tell you, I'm just wondering, because I'm kind of wondering if maybe our application process is perhaps too open, that it makes it very convenient or easy for a Sigma or Fontour to make their presentation to us. And I'm unsure as to what the application process would be in neighboring municipalities, such that urban centers or urban lands are being, prohibited from having these type of structures, where agricultural lands, apparently they're much easier to put up. So I'm just wondering.
So I can speak a little to that as well. Again, it's going to be a little bit conceptual, and so please just try and bear with me. Sure. But I mean, the coverage of Bell and Rogers, unfortunately, isn't really seen as municipality to municipality. It goes, from one to the other, And there are a lot of instances where our towers are along the borders of certain municipalities to help cover other neighboring municipalities, because as you can imagine, these towers are important infrastructure, especially in today's modern age, but not especially welcoming infrastructure in terms of health and safety concerns, aesthetic concerns, all sorts of concerns that we see over time. So getting towers in urban areas is a little more difficult. And if you can look at it aside from municipal boundaries, by putting it in an agricultural area near a dense urban center, placates a lot more people than us trying to force our way into that urban center to put up a big tower and then getting a lot of pushback and then having to move it further out again anyway. So I believe that was the logic here from our site acquisition team. If you were looking for something more in depth, I mean, I could go to our site acquisition specialist and get any more additional information.
Great. Thank you, Brendan. Just for Rosalind, before you go on, I'd like to just halt the meeting for a moment and note that the deputy mayor has just sent me a message that he has lost his internet coverage. And so I will assume the continuation of the public meeting process at this time, and we'll continue on with the public meeting and then hope that the deputy mayor's internet coverage can be restored. By the way, geographically, for our friends at Fontour, he's located in Creemore, and there are 3 towers surrounding Creemore, as well as a very extensive internet coverage by Rogers down there on the cable service. So just to show you that there is certainly a need for better internet in our community. Okay, so that's all of my questions, but I will go back. Is there any other members of the committee here? Mr. Broderick, sorry, Rosalind was going to speak first. Go ahead, Ros, and then John Brown.
Thank you, Mayor Measures. I was just going to mention Valerie and I were having a bit of a discussion today, and I have asked her to look at possibly locating or asking the Ministry of Transportation about locating the tower possibly on that parking lot area, which is actually very close to this location. And what I pointed out to Valerie was, in my mind, it made sense that federal agencies work together in that both this is a federally regulated telecommunication tower, as well as a transportation corridor. And I pointed out that I think that is something that really has to be considered in this situation. So I know that Valerie did reach out, and they are looking at doing a bit of a pre-con with the Ministry of Transportation. And I don't know if she's heard back. I mean, we didn't really have a whole lot of time today, but I'm hopeful that we will maybe look at it potentially another site. So
thank you. How ironic. I'm in the middle of the communication tower discussion and my whole internet just crashes. I mean, how ironic is that? Right?
Welcome back, Deputy Mayor. I'll return the chair back to you.
Thank you. It was just all of a sudden, it just went berserk and buzzing and everything else. So was there any other members of council that had questions or comments? Councillor Broderick, please go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just curious if are there any studies that we're aware of specific to the effects of or the effects on livestock?
Go ahead, Brandon or Valerie.
So, to the best of my knowledge, Health Canada does not look at livestock. They just focus on human bodies and the radio frequency exposure.
Thank you. Follow up, Councillor Broderick?
No, not really. That was pretty much what I expected, but it's something that at some point somebody needs to look at.
Right. Councillor Lamers, please go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. On page 5 of your graph, you're showing, or page 4, you're showing where all these telecommunications have to be placed strategically. And then if you go to page 8, you're all over the map. You're not following your same guidelines as you outlined in page 4 for your coverage areas.
Did Brandon go ahead?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So on page 4 is more, oh, sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? It's
a
more
rendering. It's just a representation of what a network would look like. But of course, in the real world, not everybody lives equally in certain parts of an area, and depending on population density, towers are placed to accommodate that. But that's just, we really show that diagram just to say to give you a better picture in your head of what service providers are trying to do.
Councillor Denis.
Was John done? John, you were done, were you? No, you weren't done yet.
I'm sorry, John. I didn't realize you had another. Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
No, it's okay.
No, so you went back to page 5 where you're leaving out those separate areas again, where you still got those dead spots in between your towers. In one graph, you say you need to strategically place them. And then on page 8, you're showing us putting them all over the map. You're not following that continuous line.
Go. I believe that comment was responded to, but go ahead and respond again. Brendan,
Yeah,
please go ahead.
so what slide 5 is actually demonstrating, I don't know if you noticed the difference between 4 and 5, but on 4, we demonstrate, you know, there's less cars on the road. So on the right side, you see a one person walking, a car passing by, and then a bus. And then in the second one, you see more people, more cars, and still the same bus. So what this is actually depicting, what we wanted to show is that as more users are making calls and the cell phones are making their requests from the towers, the tower coverage actually shrinks to service the closest requests. And as these gaps in coverage emerge, then we need infill sites where towers are then placed in between the bigger ones. So shorter towers, as you could see on the right side, to help fill those gaps as there's more travel, as there's more people, and as there's more population growth.
Thank you for that. How about Councillor Lamers? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Any further questions?
No.
No, thank you. Sorry about the cutting you short. Councillor Denis, thank you for mentioning that, and please go ahead.
Thanks very much, your Deputy Mayor. I really believe what the mayor was saying was pretty spot on there. Looking at slide 8 of their presentation, there are 4 future sites already on our map, none of which have been actually put to fruition, and we don't even know how that's going to affect us now. Living here as long as I have, I know where the dead spots are. I'm afraid everybody knows my issues with internet. I don't see where that particular area would service our areas any better than the ones that we already have proposed. And yeah, it just looks like the community's off to the side. And Brendan said himself, they'd have more difficulty in another urbanized area. They're sure they'd have more pushback. Just my comments. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that.
I can respond, Deputy Mayor.
Go ahead, Valerie.
So those future sites that are shown on the map were really just given to the planner as more as a proactive measure to say, hey, yes, we want to put up the tower here. These are the future sites we're working on, whether we have interest from other carriers who want to co-locate onto our tower. But that being said, Signum Wireless is very open to working with townships and municipalities. We've done it in the past with Niagara on the Lake, helped them with their tower protocol. So you feel as though you're not being taken advantage of. And we really do want to listen and hear where the problem areas are and where the drop calls are, because we'd like to provide coverage. And we know that you would know best because you live in the area.
Thank you. Any other comments from, go ahead, your worship.
Thank you. I'd like to just follow up on that with Valerie and consider it an invitation to meet with myself and the deputy mayor and have that conversation. Because I can assure you, we have had lots of conversations with people about internet deficits across our community. And so most certainly consider that an invitation, and I would hope that we could set that up.
Oh, for sure. I can get your information through Rosalind and make sure we connect you to our managers and the company owners.
Sure.
And
yeah. But that would be great because we get complains about lack of internet all the time. And I would like to add, though, that I appreciate that that Vontour has actually put forth an application, and because we've had others who have not and just gone ahead and put up towers. So it is, I'm glad to see they respect the policy of the township and going through. Any other comments from council? No. Okay. I think I'm going to bring this meeting to an end. Thank you for all of the public who attended and were involved in the meeting. And thank you to Brendan and Valerie for being here to answer the questions. And to Rosalind, who's always here to do a great job with things. And to you, all of my fellow councillors, and all of your questions and comments, which make these public meetings just part of what government is all about. Okay. This concludes the public meeting with respect to file number, tonight's file number of this evening's agenda. We thank all who provided written comments and for their interest in this matter. All input received with regard to this proposal will be fully considered by staff in their recommendations and by council in their decision with respect to this application. A report regarding this proposal will be prepared for council, who will make a decision concerning this matter at a future meeting. No decisions being made tonight. That concludes the public meeting, and I will turn the chair back over to his worship. Thank you, your worship.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor, and thank you again for hosting the meeting and doing that. Council, we're going to turn to item 5.2. Mr. Chase Quambury would like to make a presentation. What I would like to do is I would like to ask Mr. Quambury if he would give us all 5 minutes in a recess, because council has been meeting since 4 o'clock. And I think we all need to stand up and stretch for a minute, and then we'll commence with Mr. Quambury's presentation. So I will ask for recess for 5 minutes. At 8:20, this meeting will continue. Thank you.